I don't know about you guys, but I grew up mostly with a PC to play my games on anything else. As a kid, I more indulged in strategy games like Age of Empires, Warcraft 3, and Might and Magic. Among other games I played tended to be gems of the PC era, including today's subject matter, Nancy Drew. I absolutely adored these games as a kid, and I still do. Each one offers its own unique environments and personality. Characters are always different. The devs clearly do a lot of research about what they want to put into each game. Among my favorites were, Message in a Haunted Mansion, Danger on Deception Isle, The Haunted Carousel, The Secrets of Shadow Ranch, and The Curse of Blackmoor Manor. Blackmoor Manor has a lot of detail in it, and the incredible art design oozes all over the place. Environments are richly detailed, the voice acting is pretty decent, and the narrative structure itself is really good. Lulu, the parrot, was always my favorite character, because she seemed like she could actually talk, which is a scientific pursuit that's kind of always held my interest. How self-aware can an animal be, especially one that can mimic speech? Can it talk? Can it really talk? Fucking, I don't know. However, Lulu is actually so old in the game, she can be seen in a portrait on one of the pavilions in the parlor hall. Now talk about attention to detail right there. But let's go back a minute. Just what is Curse of Blackmoor Manor about? In Essex, England, an old English family named the Penvillins are shrouded in old folklore and wives' tales. They tell of the beast of Blackmoor, who roams the grounds of the manor and is believed to once be the grounds of witchcraft itself. In current days, the house is inhabited by the primary caretaker, Mrs. Drake, the aunt to Hugh Penvillin, who hired Nancy today. Jane Penvillin, the daughter of Hugh, her stepmother Linda, and Nigel, a historian author who was recently hired to write a book detailing the history of the family. Hugh himself is absent from the game in person, but can be reached out with a phone. He offers just enough info to tip the player in different directions. All is not well in Blackmoor, as Linda has fallen gravely ill and lashes out at fellow family members. She refuses to be seen and feels like her body is transforming into something ghastly, which is why Hugh finally brought in our quirky private investigator. Jane is a young girl of about 12 who very recently arrived from the U.S. She's a sprightly young lass with a great sense of adventure and loves to explore and play games with Nancy. Usually she has something to offer as a reward. Mrs. Drake just kind of tends to be a fucking weird old woman tending to her conservatory of strange and deranged plants.
Who's hungry? Who's ready for some nummies?
Did you say something, Mrs. Drake?
Not to you, dear. Well, aren't you the pretty spider plant?
As we arrive in Blackmoor, Nancy is greeted by a spooky figure in the dark with glowing red eyes who calls out her name. A warning almost, as if she should turn back now. But Nancy won't be so shaken. Not so easily.
There's something out there!
Where, child?
Over there! I mean, something was out there.
Come in.
After introducing us to the rest of the cast, we're left to our wits to explore the manor and see for ourselves what's going on behind the scenes. Some fans might recognize Blackmoor Manor as the first Nancy Drew game to take her outside of the United States. This definitely brings a lot of changes. A lot of her friends are no longer available for calling. Some of her friends who are not as available as they might be. Emailing and otherwise the like is definitely explained in the game. And I gotta say, I love it. Everything seems to build up so properly, and nice one, guys. Fleece 'em. You really got 'em. You know, I gotta say, this game certainly holds up for being released in 2004. The 3D models might be a little dated, but, you know, the actual details and designs in the environment are just incredibly inspired. I feel a little more cultured just by seeing it all. This game's also fucking hard! Well, if you played on Senior Detective anyway. When I picked this game up on Steam before making this video, I vastly underestimated how much I remembered about this game's puzzles, and oh boy! Can they get really contrived! Very early on, the game starts off with some pretty high-end level spooks. The gargoyle on Jane's door blinks sometimes when you open the door, which is something I always remembered oddly enough, and fucking Jesus! Yeah, that's fairly infamous of Nancy Drew games. Given that this game's engine is fucking archaic, things tend to spawn or move when Nancy moves zones. Meaning, Ethel hadn't spawned while the door was opened while Nancy was in Jane's room. However, Ethel spawns on the other side of the door, which previously she was not occupying. Yes, this is very strange to me as a human. It's the most effective jump scare of all time, although I don't think I have to be the one to cover that jump scares aren't really scary, they just play off a primal reaction of fight or flight from your brain. That being said, I don't think that this is really meant to scare the player, as it's just the result of an incredibly ancient game engine from the DOS era of games. Seriously, I think a lot of the visual designs are nice, but this is 2004 we're talking about. This is the same year as some games such as Fable, World of Warcraft, Half-Life 2, Halo 2. Granted, I know a lot of these games are huge budget release games, but PC games this era were beyond 800 by 600 resolution, goddammit! Back onto the spooks. It doesn't end there. Going to sleep for the first time in this big manor, Nancy is woken up in the middle of the night, 3:15 a.m. to be exact, by this really unnerving Latin chanting. Like, Jesus, that's pretty scary.
What is that? Oh, maybe I'd better have a look around.
And she wants to investigate? No way, man. This is one of those things where you put the blanket over your head and forget you fucking heard someone trying to summon Cthulhu in the basement. Okay? Are we all on the same page here? Alright, let's move on. This is definitely enough to put me on a bit of edge. And this isn't the last time spooky things happen in the night either, as things really start to pick up when Nancy starts getting closer to solving the mystery. Before long, Nancy will go skulking around in some expansive tunnels, which start as very mechanical, dark, and incredibly unsettling. Before you unlock some form of light source, you have to win glow sticks from Jane, and if they burn out while you're snooping around, it's game over.
Game over.
Pretty dark, and I don't mean quite literally. There's a lot of ways for Nancy to bite the bullet, including blowing herself up on some sort of chemistry alchemy puzzle. Like, Christ! Some of these minigames seem pretty loosely connected though, like the Betty minigame. Nah, I don't much care for it. I can't say I ever came to fully understand it. It's kind of like Jane's Skull and Bones, which I guess in some form of manner is like Go Fish, but somehow even less fun. Speaking of games, let's talk about fucking Duel Masters King of Games Jane over here. There are several points in the game in which it's necessary to advance by indulging this brat in some worthless minigames. I find Bull to be among the most dreadful of the lot. The idea is that you just keep rolling until you accidentally land in the same space as the enemy, then you capture them. You have to do this like 5 times in a game before you win, and I'm like 100% sure that the closer you are to winning, the faster Jane catches up to your score. It's incredibly frustrating, and has absolutely no intact involved in the slightest. So I would actually rather replace my intestines with angry eels than play this fucking minigame again. Well, at least the sounds are nice to hear.
I pass. You can go.
Petroglyph Punch was fairly irritating too, but I accidentally bugged it by saving while playing, so instead of having 1 minute to beat the score, instead I got 59 minutes. So, yeah. Lucky break. Fun. Still, the plot thickens, and we're starting to get ready to put some pieces together. We've learned by now that Mrs. Drake could obtain half the estate if Linda, the afflicted by this curse, were to run out before 6 months. A pretty powerful motive. However, Ethel and Jane seem to be up to all kinds of nonsense and tomfoolery. And wait a minute, didn't someone tell us that Jane was mostly raised in the States? Where's that damned accent coming from?
Oh, we'll have such fun. Let's play a game.
Very curious. I guess I could discuss some of the sound elements real quick. The sounds are pretty nice to hear. There's a lot of ancient mechanism devices and a lot of secret doors and passageways to find, often leaving in some excellent orgasmal stone grinding sounds. The voice acting is pretty passable, nothing superb. However, I must say, Jen Rizuma as Linda and Dora Lanier as Mrs. Petrov do an excellent job. Linda is obviously incredibly depressed, but her role is so convincing. She sounds like a dreadful harbinger of awful woes, like she's truly becoming the essence of a horrible curse.
Anyway, I understand you feel an obligation to my mother, but trust me, there's nothing you can do. You're welcome to stay, but I strongly recommend that you go home as soon as possible.
Her mood swings are definitely sold by her acting, and Dora sounds like a bewildered mom if I've ever heard one.
I have no idea. When I was out there last week, I got fed up and pulled the curtain back. She threw a fit, but otherwise she looked absolutely normal. A little pale, perhaps, but who wouldn't be pale, cooped up like that?
Lanny Minella as the returning Nancy Drew is a pretty good fit, like always. 95% of the time, she seems really on key for her role as the titular young, quirky detective. But every now and then, she just absolutely drops a line, and for some reason I can't help but feel it's the fault of the voice direction. Whomever that was, I have no clue.
Polly want a cracker?
Everyone else is pretty standard, I suppose. Good job, game. You did it. The soundtrack is really nice as well. Like the majority of Nancy Drew games, there's roughly an 11 to 14 minute playlist of atmospheric or spooky music that plays. For the most part, I very much enjoy a lot of it. I believe most of the score was handled by Kevin Manthe, who composes a lot of this stuff, so keep up the good work, my guy. One thing I've always had to admire about this game, and Nancy Drew games as a whole, is the approach to solving things. Oftentimes I find myself reaching for a pen and paper or for notes that I had taken down to help me along the way. While certain dialogue can float you along to the next point, there is a lot of times in which people just don't have anything to offer, and it becomes purely up to you to figure out what to do with the information you've gathered. By the time I finished this damn game, I was still pretty bewildered by how fucking difficult some of these puzzles can be. You better do your reading, and I mean really memorize your fucking homework, because this game gets brutal, and it will not hesitate to give you the cold shoulder while you bonk your head around trying to understand what the fucking Da Vinci Code is. Immersing yourself in the history involved with the people and location will give you a severe leg up in the competition. Blackmoor Manor has a big focus on coats of arms, zodiac symbols, and the like. All the research you need is scattered all over the place. Luckily, I had a little special someone at the time to help me along some of the zodiac parts. Otherwise, I would have definitely found myself scribbling down some notes. As for the chemistry and Scandinavian runic bits, I didn't really have too much trouble with that. The game's damn knowledgeable for being marketed to an audience of 12-year-old girls. God damn. Despite being released in 2004, I really hope there are viewers out there who will become intrigued in the Nancy Drew world themselves, so I won't spoil a lot that comes towards the end of the mystery. Just know that each time you hop into one of these games, it really does know just how to grab you and take you on a real quest. While I frankly think this game's engine is god-awful for 2004, I also think that the Gamebryo engine is garbage and straight fucking trash. But you know what? New Vegas is one of my favorite games of all time, so I pass it regardless. I actually haven't played a Nancy Drew game since around 2009, maybe. Haunting of Castle Malloy was the latest one I ever played, which was technically a 2008 release. Maybe the newer games have really brought Nancy into the realms of current gaming, and what a powerful game engine really can do for you. But I guess maybe I'll cover that in the next Nancy Drew game release, which is probably never! In my hearty opinion, Nancy Drew, The Curse of Blackmoor Manor, still stands as an excellent mystery game with a huge emphasis on weaving an incredibly dynamic historical fiction and a strong atmosphere. Don't expect any grandiose adventuring, but there's some fun puzzle mechanics. However, there's a lot of frustrating mechanics as well. I'm gonna flip this fucking board! There's also this part of the game where you contact this specialist author about the strange and supernatural, which is phenomenally written, actually. Like, I was impressed by this exchange. I thought Nancy was gonna say, "Help! My sister's a werewolf!" Oh, sorry, no, they're not sisters. "My client's a werewolf!" And the Slavic pissant was going to say, "Oof, oh yeah, that'll happen, but he's not real monster, obviously." Instead, there's a rather interesting conversation about the brain's own performance under stress, and should the circumstances that feed her ego to believe she's transforming, her body may possibly undergo a physical change, as well as a mental one, which I think there is a lot of actual medical evidence to back up. Good job, game. You did something really good with that one. Now go on and get out of here. Play some Nancy Drew. She's a good one. And don't be ashamed to look up hints, because what the fuck? What? How would I have known that?